With us on Parliament TV. Chair, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure.
You're welcome.
Chair, of course, 2 o'clock we're waiting. The Minister of Finance is about to deliver the MTBPS. But with that, of course, your committee has been prepared. You've had the PBO, which has highlighted that the MTBPS is a package of 4 instruments that must be scrutinized in a very compressed time frame, right? Now, could you walk us through the concrete steps your committee has undertaken and will undertake in the next 30 days to scrutinize the proposed fiscal framework, revenue proposals, and of course, the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill?
Yes, you are quite right about the steps, because budget is not a 1-year cycle. It's 3 years, 5 years.
Yes.
You plan for the country, but you have to reduce it to annually. To say, on this particular year, this is what we are going to present, and this is what we are going to implement.
Yeah.
And budget is an expression of policy. So now that we have the MTDP, level, we have our own targets.
Chair, we will just take a moment. We're going to come back to this. You're still watching Parliament TV. Stand by.
On Wednesday, 12 November 2025, the Minister of Finance, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, will deliver the medium-term budget policy statement to the National Assembly. The medium-term budget policy statement is a critical element in the overall budget process, as it sets out the policy framework for the budget presented every February. It also provides the country and its elected representatives with an update on the National Treasury's economic forecasts, adjusts the budgets of national departments, and makes emergency changes to spending. The MTBPS allows Parliament and the public to interact with government's budget through committee oversight over government departments when committees review the effective and efficient use of available resources. The process is the Budget Review and Recommendations Report, known as the BRRR, which must be tabled in the National Assembly before the MTBPS reports are adopted. The MTBPS makes it possible for Parliament and the public to interact with government's budget plans several months ahead of the budget itself in February the next year. Watch the medium-term budget policy statement live on Parliament TV and across Parliament social media platforms on 12 November at 2 p.m. Join the conversation on social media platforms using the hashtag MTBPS 2025. For more information, visit Parliament's website on www.parliament.gov.za. Your Parliament, your voice, your future.
You're still watching Parliament TV. Apologies for that small interruption. We are still in conversation with the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Finance ahead of the MTBPS that is scheduled to begin at 2 p.m. in the National Assembly. Chair, we were in conversation, apologies for that, and you had just set out that what people should know is that the budget is not just a 3-year term, it's for 5 years as well, and that you should keep on focusing on the objectives as a whole, right? You also mentioned that for today's MTBPS, even if the NDP is not mentioned, it doesn't mean that it will be forgotten as a whole, right? In that, Chair, just take us through again the 30 days that the committee will undertake in the next 30 days, some of the things that you will do to scrutinize the proposal of the fiscal framework, revenue proposals, and the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill.
Of course, budget is reduced to be regulated by laws of Parliament. what we call the money matters related bill,
Yes.
which regulate the period within which you have to process the adoption of the fiscal framework and then the appropriations. The first time frame is 15 days, whereby after today, when the minister will have tabled the budget, day after tomorrow, we get a formal briefing
Yes.
as committees of Parliament. That is the two committees of the National Assembly, Finance and Appropriations, and two committees of the NCOP, Select Committee Finance and Select Committee Appropriations. From there, we are going to get a briefing from Parliamentary Budget Office and the Fiscal and Finance Commission. After that, we go for public hearings. Members of the public have to make inputs
Yes.
as to how do they want the budget to look like at the end. We receive those written submissions and oral submissions, and then we get responses from SARS and National Treasury and their entities. We compile a report which is adopted by the committee. And then I think on the 27th of November, the report will be tabled in the National Assembly and it will be adopted. From there, it goes to the NCOP.
The NCOP. Now, Chair, of course, you mentioned 15 days and then another period, and these are short. It's a very compressed period of time.
Yes.
Now, given that time pressure, how do you ensure that the scrutiny is genuinely substantive and not merely just a rubber stamp of an exercise?
You have to do things by the book. Because the issue of public participation is not just a matter of compliance that the public has participated. You must make sure that the public participate adequately.
Yes.
We put adverts in the media, newspapers, social media today, and all other platforms that are there for public to know that on these days they will be making inputs, written and oral. And they do respond. And these days, because of the advent of social media and artificial intelligence, people no longer have to come to Parliament.
Yeah.
If you remember in the past, stakeholders had to fly, come here, or we had to go out and do public hearings. So in our case, we use more of the digital technology that is there to talk to people wherever they are. Live, we engage them. Then
Yes.
they make hearings. We take their submissions, record them and look at the inputs, and then we take it from there. And those that come physical, who prefer to come physically, they are accommodated to do so. Yes.
And Chair, of course, we're highlighting one of the priorities of the 7th Parliament, which is strengthening public participation, facilitating it and ensuring that it's appropriate and sufficient public participation. Now, as a constitutional principle as a whole, then how will the committee incorporate the views of the stakeholders, of the public, once they've submitted their oral submissions and even their written submissions to the committee?
We listen to issues that they raise, and if they find resonance with what is in the policy, what is in the constitution, and then also what is contained in the budget, we as the committee take that as part of our submission to the National Assembly, that the public is raising this genuine matter. Because the fact of the matter is that you can't take decisions as Parliament without involving the people who are affected by that decision. That is the cornerstone of public participation. In the past, under apartheid, there were no public hearings. We never had the apartheid government going out to consult anybody. They would just meet here in Cape Town or in Bantustan parliaments, take decisions, whether you like, if you didn't like it, they shall scope and donor you So we're living in a democratic era where people must see that their inputs are taken into consideration, and we publish the report that we adopt in the National Assembly. But this budget this afternoon must make sure that it deals with issues of economic growth. Our economy hasn't been growing at the expected level. To make a dent on unemployment, to make a dent on poverty, to make a dent on inequality. These are three critical factors that are seriously affecting our people on the ground. There's poverty out there. There are people who go to sleep without food. So we must work very hard as decision makers to make sure that the issue of unemployment, more especially youth unemployment, is quite high. At least the past 2 days we saw statistics saying that 284,000+ jobs have been created.
Correct.
We need more jobs. South Africa has been lifted out of a grey list by FATF. It means now we'll be able to attract investors. How do we use the G20, for instance, to market South Africa? It's for the first time in the history of Africa for G20 to come to an African country. Despite what other people are saying, there's no Boer or Afrikaner who's being slaughtered in this country. So what the president of another country across the Atlantic is saying, we don't know where he gets that from. And it's out of order because he's not the spokesperson for our country. He has got enough problems with this country. He must deal with them there. There's no Afrikaner who's being slaughtered in this country. So it's wrong for a president of another country to paint a bad picture on another sovereign state. We are not a province or a state of that country. We are an independent sovereign state.
And of course, Chair, then bringing it back home and especially speaking to our Parliament's oversight function and fiscal choices. In May, when the Minister delivered his budget speech, he stated that the budget was about difficult trade-offs, he called it, right? Now, from your oversight perspective and the committee as a whole, how will the committee then assess whether these trade-offs that the minister spoke of in this MTBPS, that they will truly balance the fiscal sustainability with the urgent need to address South Africa's developmental areas and goals? I mean, you spoke about socioeconomic issues, you spoke about unemployment, poverty, we're speaking access to healthcare, access to education, all those things. How do we ensure that the trade-off that the minister spoke of speaks to those issues?
Yeah, of course, there are so many needs. Remember, South Africa is a country with two economies.
Okay.
There is an economy of the rich. Where we are here in Cape Town, that's where rich people stay. If you go to Camps Bay, wherever around here, it's like you are in Europe. But from here, you go to Mokwasi in northwest, you go to Alexander in Johannesburg, Malamulele. It's a third world. So the needs of those two economies are different. So you have to find a way of balancing. Those who stay in informal settlement, in rural areas, in the villages, have got needs like schools, social grants, access to health facilities. But somebody who stays in Camps Bay, he doesn't need a clinic. He has got access to state-of-the-art medical facilities, surgeries, hospitals, and stuff like that. So you have to find a way to say, students here want money for NSFAS. We said the doors of learning and culture shall be open to all. Indeed, we have to open those doors for people, for students who come from poor background. The issue of health, NHI, we've been talking about NHI for many years. It is time that we have to roll out the NHI. People have to see it. People experience serious problems with our health facilities. Something must be done. There's the issue of crime. We appreciate that 20,000 plus police have been employed. I think we are still going to experience another 10,000 plus police to fight crime. People are experiencing crime. Not so long, we saw people being killed in Khayelitsha here and Michel's Plain. People can't be slaughtered like animals. Daylight, we raise children in a violent society. So those are the issues that we have to look at. Here is crime, here is a student at UCT, UWC, here is a clinic, here is a road. How do you balance all these needs? Yeah. You have to find a way, because all these are basic for somebody to survive. So that's where the balancing act comes into the picture.
And Chair, of course, there are concerns about the contractionary fiscal stance. How will the committee evaluate the potential impact of spending constraints on critical services and public trust? And what would you say to citizens that are worried about service delivery?
Yes, the fact of the matter is that the masses are never wrong. Once the public raises an issue, it means it's a genuine matter. And we are public representatives. We didn't apply to come to Parliament. We were elected by those people. They are quite right. The issue of water, and the President has raised it in almost all his SONA addresses, that the issue of water in rural areas, in townships, must be attended to. And I think the Minister of Water, Honorable Majotina, is trying by all means to make sure that that matter be attended to. If you are like me, who come from Malamlele, in those villages, you will know what it means when people talk about the lack of water. So we have to deal with some of those serious delivery challenges that people are raising. Access roads, even just the roads going to the graveyard. Now that is summer and it's rain season, some graveyards are not accessible. So you take things for granted when you are seated here. The municipality must make sure that it services roads to the graveyard, it services roads to schools, there's water at school. Can you imagine now with these heat waves that we're experiencing as a result of global warming? Learners don't have water at a school. What must happen to those learners the whole day? We must make sure that schools have got decent water, they have got decent sanitation, and all those facilities that are needed for education environment. And many other services. Of course, we are doing well when it comes to electricity. Government is also doing well when it comes to housing. But the challenge of urbanization is something that has to be attended to. More and more people now are drifting into urban areas. Hence, you see the population of Cape Town and Gauteng as a whole and Durban spiking. Because people say, but there are no opportunities in rural areas.
That's true.
Then more especially young people, they prefer to stay in big cities. And then you don't have the requisite infrastructure to accommodate them. When people come to Cape Town here, the next thing you don't have houses for them. What do you do? It becomes a problem. So we have to deal with these challenges. And urbanization will never stop. More and more people in 2050, I think 60+% of the population of this country will be staying in urban areas. So we have to plan for many generations to come. Hence, we talk about what we call sustainable development. It's not the development that caters for us who are living, but even for those who are unborn. That's what we have to do.
And Chair, just finally to people that are sitting at home, people that are at work, people that have businesses, why should ordinary South Africans be interested in the MTBPS, in the processes that the Standing Committee on Finance, Appropriations, Select Committee on Finance and Appropriations will be undertaking in the next 30 days? And why should they participate?
They must participate because this is a budget of the country. It's not a budget for treasury. It's a budget that affects somebody who's zero, who was born 2 minutes ago, to somebody who's 90 years old, who's earning a pension, a social grant. So all age groups, all sectors are affected by this budget. It is about our lives. It is about services that we get. So without budget, there's no state, there's no government, there's no life. So people must be directly interested in what's happening, because that's what they voted us for, to represent them here, to talk on their behalf. And we are going to do so. And we will believe that this budget must deal with economic growth so as to dent unemployment and poverty. So that's where their interests come in. How is this budget going to create jobs for our young people? How is this budget going to dent unemployment and inequality? Yes, and grow the economy for all. Better life for all.
Thank you so much for joining us, Chairperson.
You are welcome.
And of course, that was the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Finance, assuring South Africans of Parliament's vigilance and alertness in as far as oversight is concerned in the manner in which revenue is collected and spent. Now, there's still more to come right here on Parliament TV. Don't go away as we await the MTBPS.
Of the budget is one of the most important oversight functions of Parliament. The budget reflects the choices that government has to make, and it is the tool it uses to achieve its economic and development goals. In the budget, government sets out what it's going to spend and the income it collects, which it needs to finance its expenditure. The government has to balance a wide range of legitimate demands with limited resources at its disposal. Budget oversight is intended to help government move forward to realize its goals by increasing government's accountability to its citizens. The budget process occurs over a period of about 18 months. The budget of any financial year undergoes a 4-stage process. The stages are drafting, planning and formulation, the legislative process, implementation, as well as auditing and assessment. Parliament and government departments plan the budget for months in advance for the following year, implementing the current budget while continuously monitoring it for delivery and compliance with policy, and evaluating and auditing the previous year's budget. During the legislative phase of the budget, the National Assembly, the National Council of Provinces, and the provincial legislatures debate budget votes with the involvement of interest groups and civil society, the media, and the general public. This is to ensure that they reflect national priorities and accommodate outcomes and actions required by the mid-term strategic framework. It is important to measure the effectiveness of public spending and the manner in which public resources are spent. The more immediate goals are to ensure that government budget priorities are consistent with the declared policy objectives, and that the financial resources allocated to priority areas are spent fully and properly. However, a larger purpose of the budget process is to contribute to democracy through ensuring openness, transparency, and accountability for public resources.
Welcome back. This year's budget is being presented in what the Parliamentary Budget Office describes as a polycrisis, a moment defined by several interlocking global and domestic challenges. Internationally, the world is grappling with rising geopolitical tensions, particularly on the African continent, ongoing climate shocks, and emerging financial risks that are reshaping markets and food security. Domestically, South Africa faces its own set of profound difficulties. Unemployment remains staggeringly high at 43%, making it one of the highest in the world. Economic growth remains weak, forecast at just 1.1% for 2025, and households are struggling under a severe cost of living crisis. Basic services such as health and education are under immense strain, with tens of thousands of unfilled posts and declining service standards. Yet, amid these pressures, there's also been a major policy success story. On 24 October 2025, South Africa was officially removed from the Financial Action Task Force, which is known as FATF grey list, marking a major step in restoring investor confidence and strengthening financial integrity. This success, however, comes with a warning. Reforms must continue to avoid a relapse when the next FATF evaluation begins in 2026. The fiscal environment remains extremely tight. While overall spending is on track, revenue collection is lagging, capital expenditure is underperforming, and local government finances are in crisis, with many municipalities ending the financial year in a negative balance. Against this backdrop, the minister must make difficult trade-offs, balancing fiscal discipline with the urgent need to drive growth, sustain essential services, and support struggling households. Now, to unpack these dynamics further and to explore what Parliament and the public should be watching for when the minister delivers the statement, we are joined by the Director of the Parliamentary Budget Office, Dr. Dumisani Yanchis. Doc, thank you very much for taking time off your busy schedule this afternoon to talk to us.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Looking forward to the conversation. You're correct. It's a busy schedule today.
I can understand, Doc, and I'm really grateful that you took time to talk to us here at Parliament TV. Doc, if you can go to the conversation. Your latest analysis described the 2025 MTBPS as being framed with a poly crisis. Could you expand on what that means and how it shapes the minister's policy space this year?
I think thank you so much for the point. The briefing is really to set the context from which the policy statement was presented for this afternoon, but it's also to let members of Parliament, South Africans, to understand geopolitical issues that are happening, which really have impacted the cost of living globally, have impacted the economic growth globally. Different regions, we mentioned the tariffs issue, still really lingering at the back of our mind, which has large implications for economic development and growth and so many other things. But I think what we're trying to say to members in our brief is to say, look, let us understand this context. And when the policy statement, which revises the budget for the current year, but also revise the fiscal policy framework over the next 3 years, we take those contexts into account. So when we're looking at that, we see how these proposals are likely to improve on these dynamics that are sitting in economically, fiscally, but also the implication for societal outcomes as well. So that's really in a high nutshell how we try to support members in that regard.
Now, Doc, despite this positive news of South Africa's removal from the FATF grey list, economic growth remains subdued. And what structural issues continue to hold our country's economy back?
Look, I want to also start by really re-emphasizing the point that in our brief we do highlight the removal of the country from the grey list. It's a very good success story as part of the context of the mid-term development, largely because what we lack in our country, a lot linked to the question that you're referring to, is the lack of investment. And when we remember when we were grey listed, some of the areas that we knew would be impacted, it's the level of investment we're going to get. So what we're saying in the brief is say, look, one of the way of assessing the success of the removal of grey list is really observe the level of investment will come into a country. Because you'd remember even before then, we've been struggling to get investment in our economy, particularly when we get direct investment. It's not really always went to productive sectors, which we expect them a lot to create jobs in particular. And that's a bigger issue in our view. We're not seeing investment coming to country, both from government and from the private sector in a level that the National Development Plan has set out to be. And we need to really push for that. And I know the budget in earlier budget tried to emphasize the importance. For me, that's a bigger issue, which Parliament, when they look at the policy statements, revised fiscal framework, and adjustment, we need to ensure there's support for investment, but also importantly, the household man. Of course, the precarious situation of cost of living in this country is not a South African issue. It's really a global issue. And whatever we do, whatever Parliament guide, the policy statements has to really take into account thinking how much households are struggling with the cost of living in this country. So those are some of the 2 points, but largely also issue of unemployment has been quite high. And really, again, largely because of lack of investment, lack of growth, lack of investment in productive sectors of the economy, which would naturally create jobs. And really, that's a really context which, in our view, members need to look at the afternoon presentation in those lenses.
And to those who just joined us at home, we are talking to the Director of the Parliamentary Budget Office, Dr. Jantjies. Please stay tuned.
Do you know what the Parliamentary Budget Office is and what it does? This video will answer that question. The Money Bills Amendment Procedure and Related Matters Act No. 9 of 2009 provides for the establishment of the Parliamentary Budget Office. Section 15(1) of the Act reads as follows. There is hereby established a Parliamentary Budget Office headed by a Director, the main objective of which is to provide independent, objective and professional advice and analysis to Parliament on matters related to the budget and other money bills. So, what are the functions of the Parliamentary Budget Office?
The core functions of Parliamentary Budget Office is to support the implementation of the Money Bills Amendment Procedures and Related Matters Act by undertaking research and analysis for the 4 committees on finance and appropriations in the National Assembly and in the National Council of Provinces. The Parliamentary Budget Office provides an annual reviews and analysis of the documentations tabled in Parliament by the Executive in terms of the Money Bills Act. The office also provides advice and analysis on proposed amendments to the fiscal framework, the division of revenue, other money bills, and policy proposals with budget implications. Additionally, the Parliamentary Budget Office monitors and synthesizes matters with budget implication tabled and adopted in the Houses, with particular emphasis on reports by other committees. The Parliamentary Budget Office keeps abreast of policy debates and developments in the key expenditure and revenue areas. It monitors and reports on potential unfunded mandates arising out of legislative, policy, or budgetary proposals. Finally, the office undertakes any other work deemed necessary by the Director to support the implementation of the Money Bills Amendment Procedure and Related Matters Act.
There you have it, the Parliamentary Budget Office, or PBO in a nutshell, providing support and analysis needed to ensure sound financial decision-making.
Welcome back, and to those who just joined us, we are talking to the Director of the Parliamentary Budget Office, Dr. Dumisani Jantjies. Doc, just to continue with our conversation now, in the brief, your office knows that the households are at a breaking point. And now, how should this reality influence budget adjustments, especially regarding social protection measures like the SRD grant?
Look, when you look at I like using the monetary policy approach to this, because when you look at the recent reports from the central banks, talks about the concern around the administered prices, electricity, water, municipal rates, and all of those are some of the biggest costs that household has to bear because most of those prices have largely been way higher than inflation over time. And clearly, look at the support to households, particularly low-income households, has often not really been way beyond the inflation. And when you look at the average wage now, it is actually way below the basket, the basic basket for food, you know. And clearly, the thinking around the support to civil government services and all of that has to be taken into account. If we reduce government services, essential services, it means in many instances households struggle to meet the daily needs. But also, importantly, it's not only about low-income households, but just generally households are taking a lot of strain, and cost of living is quite high. And we would expect that both fiscal policy and monetary policy would be in a way supportive rather than unsupportive. Obviously, if you have high interest rate, it means it puts more burden on households. Those who have loans and debts, they have to pay more from their pockets, both for the economy and for the households. There was some of the thinking that we said, let's understand that context, that at this stage, in the current stage, households are taking a lot of strain from the economic environment that we're facing. And the evidence, we provided evidence that show that in our briefing, you remember that.
And to move on, Doc, you also highlight an alarming strain on public services, particularly health and education. So what risk to further spending cuts pose for these critical sectors? And as you answer that question, I just want to give you a case study of a department of education in the Eastern Cape. I had an opportunity to speak to the chairperson of the Select Committee on Education, Sciences and Creative Industries, Mr. Feni, who indicated that the Department of Education in the Eastern Cape had spent 99% of its infrastructure budget with only 10% of its targets achieved. And that is the department that had initially asked for over 7 billion rands, but was allocated 1.8. But even from that 1.8, only 10% of its infrastructure targets were achieved.
Sure. Look, I think in our VUNA report, we feel the oversight of Parliament is very crucial around those areas, because at the end of the day, we shouldn't allow, Parliament should not allow a report that says we've spent all our money. That's not helpful. Let's rather ask government to send us a report that says what has been the outcome of that money, how much classrooms have been built, how much teachers have been hired, and all of those other things. I think that's the key issue. But another thing that we've highlighted in our report talks about the efficiency. We do recognize the importance of ensuring the efficiency spending, as you rightfully raised the point around the example in Eastern Cape. But what we've raised over the years, it's the worrying trend that shows that the real spending per capita in some of these big spending items like health, education has largely declined. And when you have a real spending decline, it does tell you that if you want to improve the outcomes, you are unlikely to improve the outcomes. But it's even worse if we're going to say there are even efficiency in that spend, which could in effect says the real spending is even far lower. The real actual spending is far lower than what we want to have. In a normal sense, you don't want real spending to decline, per capita. You want it to increase, because that simply means services are declining. And that's our concern, that the cutting the spending or reducing the spending has to take into account to say, how do you protect the real spend per capita to maintain a particular level of growth, or stable at least, rather than decline, how we've seen it over time. But of course, in the last budget, we've seen that improving a lot, but we hope that adjustments would be in a way that Parliament can see stability in increasing some of the spending per capita, because that's a really essential purpose of social service. Otherwise, you would have spending which really doesn't really talk to the outcome, which is a problem for Parliament in my view, that Parliament wants to see the improvement in outcomes in education and health. And I noticed Dr. Maswanga earlier on spoke about the issue of health provision, which is a very critical issue. But if spending continues to decline, it doesn't say it's a priority for government or for Parliament if it declines over time. And that's our concern, to say, when you look at the revised framework, but also adjustments, we need to look at it within that context as well. Is it improving on spending per capita? Is it likely to improve on outcomes of these key essential services, which many of the population in provinces, particularly poor provinces, rely heavily on government services in that regard.
Now, Doc, another sphere of government that seems to be in financial serious distress is the local government sphere. Now, what should Parliament be doing differently to address the persistent weaknesses in municipal fiscal performances? We know that it's been a serious challenge when it comes to that sphere of the government in terms of finances.
I would say there is no silver bullet to that, because interesting, when you're presenting yesterday to the committee members, they say, yeah, we keep on reading these things. But the big issue with the local government is that we cannot afford local government that is dysfunctional, because that's why the phase of the entry level of the government services is crucial that we make it work. One of the bigger point we raise is the issue of consequences. That's the first thing. The biggest challenge in the local government, we don't see in a strong sense of consequence management where there's transaction, or failure to deliver. And what we said in our recommendations is that failure to realize performance target should be seen as discretion, as a financial discretion or financial failure. Should not be seen as just failure to realize outcomes. That's a big thing. We need to have consequence management. Secondly, the other point that we noted is the issue of capacity. And it's a thing that, in my view, we need to deal with it, how much we're able to ensure that there's required capacity in all localized government. I understand the issue tried to use district development model as trying to strengthen that. But one of the things that we've also raised is a broader issue. It's multiple layers of oversight over a service delivery. We find that we've got district, we've got provinces, we've got MEC, we've got minister within that layer, and then we've got Parliament. All those channels, it's unnecessary efficiency. There has to be a way where we reduce the multiple layer of oversight, but ensure that we've got very limited layers, but it is more effective, particularly focusing on consequence management and ensuring capacity is built in the local government. Yeah.
Now that you mentioned that, before I let you go, I really need to ask you this one. So from what you've just said now, how does then the PPO plan to support the members of Parliament in interpreting the fiscal data and identifying evidence-based interventions during this critical period?
We'll start by looking at the revised numbers. But what we've done over the past 2 years, we've developed the capability that enables us to say to members of Parliament, when you look at these numbers that are presented, revised numbers, this is how they are likely to impact macroeconomic performances. This is how they likely to lead to employment, this is how they likely to growth, and this is how they likely to lead to inequality. And then we let them ask the question, is this what we want to see? Is this growth that we want, or is this employment that we want, or is it level of inequality that we want to see over the medium term? So that's the first very important aspect from our perspective. Let us show members what is the impact of this presentation likely to be on this macroeconomic performances, your employment growth, inequality, and so on. Things. And then we can look quite deeper, going deeper into the investment, how much level of investment is likely to get to employment, and so on. So that's in a nutshell how we'll look at it in a nutshell. And Parliament would decide they agree with the proposals or not.
Doc, once again, thank you very much for taking time off your busy schedule and for schooling us on the parliamentary budget processes.
Thanks so much. I much appreciate.
Well, that was Dr. Yanchis, the Director of the Parliamentary Budget Processes, giving us some lessons on the work of his office. So please stay tuned to Parliament TV.
Processing of the budget is one of the most important oversight functions of Parliament. The budget reflects the choices that government has to make, and it is the tool it uses to achieve its economic and development goals. In the budget, government sets out what it's going to spend and the income it collects, which it needs to finance its expenditure. The government has to balance a wide range of legitimate demands with limited resources at its disposal. Budget oversight is intended to help government move forward to realize its goals by increasing government's accountability to its citizens. The budget process occurs over a period of about 18 months. The budget of any financial year undergoes a 4-stage process. The stages are drafting, planning and formulation, the legislative process, implementation, as well as auditing and assessment. Parliament and government departments plan the budget for months in advance for the following year, implementing the current budget while continuously monitoring it for delivery and compliance with policy, and evaluating and auditing the previous year's budget. During the legislative phase of the budget, the National Assembly, the National Council of Provinces, and the provincial legislatures debate budget votes with the involvement of interest groups and civil society, the media, and the general public. This is to ensure that they reflect national priorities and accommodate outcomes and actions required by the mid-term strategic framework. It is important to measure the effectiveness of public spending and the manner in which public resources are spent. The more immediate goals are to ensure that government budget priorities are consistent with the declared policy objectives and that the financial resources allocated to priority areas are spent fully and properly. However, a larger purpose of the budget process is to contribute to democracy through ensuring openness, transparency, and accountability for public resources. On Wednesday, 12 November 2025, the Minister of Finance, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, will deliver the medium-term budget policy statement to the National Assembly. The medium-term budget policy statement is a critical element in the overall budget process as it sets out the policy framework for the budget presented every February. It also provides the country and its elected representatives with an update on the National Treasury's economic forecasts, adjusts the budgets of national departments, and makes emergency changes to spending. The MTBPS allows Parliament and the public to interact with government's budget through committee oversight over government departments when committees review the effective and efficient use of available resources. The process is the Budget Review and Recommendations Report, known as the BRRR, which must be tabled in the National Assembly before the MTBPS reports are adopted. The MTBPS makes it possible for Parliament and the public to interact with government's budget plans several months ahead of the budget itself in February the next year. Watch the medium-term budget policy statement live on Parliament TV and across Parliament social media platforms on 12 November at 2 p.m. Join the conversation on social media platforms using the hashtag MTBPS2025. For more information, visit Parliament's website on www.parliament.gov.za. Your Parliament, your voice, your future.
And you're still watching Parliament TV. And if you've just joined us, we have had amazing, insightful conversations with key figures in relation to the budget process. Now, we had just had a conversation with Dr. Maswanganyi, the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Finance, on the role of parliamentary committees' oversight on the budget process. And of course, we also spoke to Dr. Dumisani Jantjies from the Parliamentary Budget Office, who was telling us about their input when it comes to the committees of Finance and Appropriations. And now we are fortunate today to have a resident analyst, Mr. Mielani Holeni, an economist and governance specialist with DSO Consulting. Thank you so much for coming to Parliament TV.
It's a pleasure to have me. Thank you very much, Sipu.
Mr. Holeni, of course, these are very interesting times. I mean, we had a budget 3.0 at some point earlier this year, right? And a lot of people have been concerned with regards to our finances as a country. And just yesterday, Temikos was having a conversation now with the PBO that, yes, they said that there's a decrease, just a little bit of a decrease in our unemployment rates. Is that because people are now employable, or is it a case of businesses are there and they're really employing people?
Well, I think, what we need to consider always is that even as we are going to talk about the budget, and as much as we talk about employment as well, all of these things do not happen in a vacuum. Yeah. They happen, in the context of, macroeconomic factors, and sometimes, factors that we don't even understand how they are working. So if we see at least, a decline in unemployment, it's positive. And it means that, there are certain sectors of the economy which are starting to perform. And I think that is the backdrop against which the macroeconomic conditions are looking like within South Africa now. We are seeing a moderate improvement in some of, the factors and some of, the sectors. Yes. We're seeing at least, some, the economy is rearing to want to go. Of course, we need to be careful that, there are forecasts that had been put forward, earlier, even with the budget process, forecast, by various, players. But all of those forecasts in terms of the economic growth if they were to materialize, I think we would see a lot more employment of people. In other words, unemployment, declining. However, the moderate growth that we are seeing and the improvement is starting to show that, the economy is moving in the right direction, albeit very slow.
Yes. And of course, then earlier, the reason why we had the budget 1.0, 2.0, and then 3 was that contentious issue about VAT, right? Now, as an economist, at your point when you were sitting in your office and you were hearing that there were proposals about increasing VAT, what was going through your mind at the time?
Look, we always have to think about, the different, sectors of our economy.
Okay.
I think, Dr. Maswanganyi talked about the dual economy that we have. At times, I could even say that, it's more than the dual economy because the various factors affect various communities very differently. Yeah. So for that matter, if you are increasing VAT is what everyone at least is exposed to within the economy. And it means, even the poorest of the poor are going to be hit hard very, very early with that, proposal of increasing VAT.
Yeah.
In as much as, there may be zero-rated, items, there may be items which are excluded, but the reality is that, you are spreading now the difficulties within the economy.
Okay.
Whereas you ought to be looking at various ways of how do you increase the coffers of government without necessarily impacting the poorest of the poor, and also not impacting business, because business as well are contributing, and there are very good taxpayers out there who are supporting the bulk of the economy. The middle class as well is also supporting the bulk of the economy.
Yes.
And I think with what we have in South Africa, we have a smaller portion of the middle class, which is supporting a large portion, given the fact that the population statistics have been revised. So still we have now a lesser percentage of people who are in the middle class who are now supporting the rest of the people from a subsidy point of view, from covering various functions, such as the free basic education that is there, the free health, and all of those other things that are given out for free. So that has an impact with regards to the greater majority.
And with today's focus on the MTBPS, of course, everybody's waiting in anticipation for that 2 p.m. Delivery of the MTBPS. What context, what economic context is the MTBPS being delivered, and what can we expect to hear from the Minister today?
I think when we look at just, the metrics in terms of, the budget, deficit that we've been running for a while. So in this case, the budget, to GDP deficit, we're expecting that, there will be some kind of consolidation, although as well it will be not as major, so there won't be fireworks there.
Okay.
And going into the MTF as well, there will be at least, some kind of consolidation. But as these numbers are moving up and down, the needs, within the economy are growing.
Yeah.
So then the need to go back and borrow in the markets, may then arise, where perhaps, now when we jump into the debt, figures, where, we've jumped, I think, from about 2003 to now, from 23%, where we have debt to GDP sitting at 23%, which has now risen all the way up to about 78%. So we expect that it will stabilize at about 78% thereabouts. But that if you compare it with a picture about 20 years ago, is a huge jump in terms of where the economy sits from a debt point of view. Alongside comes the debt servicing interest. You've moved now from about 9%, you're sitting at about 21% of the entire fiscus. So if you were to take a rand, for instance, and say 1 rand, that would go into various, services, you already have to deduct, 21 cents, from that, rand. And that's the impact that, where the budget, starts, falling short and short. And then from there goes into the public wage, bills, because, you have to pay civil servants, and there have to be raises and so on. So the pressures, I think, that sit, with what the minister has to be discussing is the fact that, there are already fixed items within the budget, which is not able to maneuver much. If we then look at, for instance, the the expenditure or the estimates of expenditure with regards to the social package. You know, the social package is now like, you know, at the top. You know, it's ahead of the economic services, ahead of health, ahead of learning and culture, ahead of, you know, health, ahead of every other, you know, service that is there. Of course, you know, we can argue that COVID-19, you know, the remnants of it, you know, are still being felt with, you know, the social relief of distress, you know, grant, you know, that was now sitting at about 34 billion. So we're talking huge numbers, which of course, you know, we hope that the position going forward, you know, from where the budget, you know, is going to be, the minister will then say, right, we've, you know, done sufficient or adequate relief. Now we are now going to move on, you know, and at least, you know, come up with a different way of providing relief, which we hope that, you know, the minister should be advancing plans around, you know, how to grow the economy. Often we see in the opening speech of the minister, we talk about growing the economy, but if you look at the budget does not always reflect the things that are going to support, you know, the growth of the economy. And so, you know, if you move from about 40.5, you know, billion that, you know, goes into, you know, the social, you know, relief, the social services, and you compare it with the economic, you know, development, which is about 23 or 21 billion, so thereabouts. There's a huge difference. And even if you now dissect, you know, each one of the items of where the money goes to, you will find that, you know, there's an aspect where the money, you know, goes into backlog. The money goes into, you know, for instance, you know, in the economic services, you know, some of, you know, the bulk of the money, you know, will go into servicing the debt, you know, that Sandral has, you know, for the roads, you know, upgrades in Gauteng and the maintenance and so on. So you already have, you know, committed amounts which are not going into real services or aspects which are going to stimulate the economy, but are going into servicing backlogs, you know, public, you know, service, you know, wages, and all of those, you know, things within there. So I think we have the minister is a very difficult task to be able to start, you know, turning the ship now to perhaps, you know, look at where the SRD was and start, you know, making bold decisions about how do you take an SRD where people were dependent on a grant to start stimulating small businesses, to start stimulating aspects of the economy that are going to be sustainable. So I think that is where, you know, what we are expecting from here on. Of course, you know, there's talk about, you know, the fiscal, you know, anchor rules that, you know, are going to come about. There's, you know, talk about, you know, the inflation targeting, which, you know, needs to be, you know, revised and so on. So, but I think those the things that will move the needle for us is economic growth, because we're going to have to revise down the forecasts. That is catastrophic because then we're not going to achieve the goal. So you want an economy that is vibrant. You want an economy that is growing. Of course, you know, then that economy must be underpinned. There will be expenditure of some sort. So you can't keep on curtailing the expenditure to be able to balance the numbers. Yes, you need to rein in the economy, but you need to at least, you know, direct, you know, the expenditure into where you are the economic services and the growth of the economy is going to take place.
And of course, with that, you mentioned quite a few important things. I mean, on one side, you have the social economic issues that we have, right? And on the other side, you have this deficit that we have in terms of the how we have to fund these loans that we've made, right? So any suggestions on how then the minister can balance those two, ensuring that there is enough revenue to pay up what we need to pay up, but also balancing the socio-economic things, ensuring that South Africans are taken care of, because I mean, ultimately there are no jobs and they are dependent on your socio-economic, on your social grants, for example.
So I think for a while we've been talking about how do we re-industrialize South Africa. You know, we all, you know, will tell the history of how South Africa industrialized, even in the difficult days, you know, when there were sanctions, to the point where there are various, you know, entities, you know, such as your IDCs that have been formed. You know, you have the likes of, you know, the DBSAs that, you know, are able to attract, you know, capital. So really you're sitting with a number of DFIs, but you also are sitting with industry. If you look at the petroleum industry, you look at, you know, the manufacturing industry. Unfortunately, along the way, we've lost, you know, some of the industries. You know, the steel industry has been lost, the textile industry has been lost, and so on and so forth due to competitive forces. But the re-industrialization of the country, we sit with minerals, which, you know, are driving the economy. If you look at platinum, gold, we still have, quite, significant, reserves. But what we also have as well is the minerals that are powering the renewables economy, the green economy, which we ought to be taking advantage of. So in this case, we have coal as well that, we're exporting high grade, coal, going into various countries where those countries, keep it a stockpile for their energy requirements. On our side, we are not able to take advantage of the fact that we have these minerals and we can go into a beneficiation process which kicks off, the reindustrialization of the economy and looking at specific items where there can be now processing, there can be improvement, there can be, putting up of, micro light, industries, but manufacturing. I think, you talk about the likes of, various areas, Germiston as the workshop of South Africa. You talk about, the Eastern Cape in terms of East London as well as, the former Port Elizabeth in Gqeberha. Those are the motor, cities. And you also have now the SEZs that are coming up. So there are those opportunities where money should be directed deliberately and not just, money to, stop the hunger tonight. But money that's going to at least, sustain growth and job, creation going forward.
And of course, Mr. Holeni is with us in studio the whole day today to give you some analysis with regards to the MTBPS, the budget. And of course, you should be interested because it is your money. It is taxpayers' money that you are working so hard for. And of course, you're still watching Parliament TV, and we're about to bring you the House, the National Assembly, where Minister Godongwana will take the National Assembly podium to deliver the much anticipated midterm budget policy statement right here on Parliament TV. You can have your say using the hashtag MTBPS 2025. Keep watching Parliament TV.
In terms of the Constitution, government is accountable to Parliament. Parliament, as the representative of the people, monitors and seeks to influence government policy and action through the budget. The budget is the instrument for translating policies and plans into public goods and services. Any policy or plan without a budget attached to it is unlikely to be successfully implemented. Economic success depends on the ability of government to employ limited resources with maximum effect. The role of Parliament in this regard cannot be overstated. Parliament's duty is to detect and prevent abuse, prevent illegal and unconstitutional budgetary conduct on the part of the government, make government budgetary operations more transparent, and hold the government answerable on how taxpayers' money is spent. Parliament exercises its oversight through various portfolio committees that assess the budget and other plans, as well as the performance of each department, including their financial performance, and hold them accountable. The budget process is crucial to good governance because it ensures that government expenditure remains aligned to South Africa's policy goals and objectives. What is also of great importance is that ongoing monitoring and tracking of the executive by Parliament allows for intervention in the event of wrongful expenditure and failures in service delivery. The process holds government
1 2 1 1 2 1 1 2 1 1 2 1 1 2 1 2 1 1 2 1 1 yep 1 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 I don't think it's working. 1 2 1 1 2 1 1 2 1 2 1 2 2 2 2 2 2 3 4 1 2 1 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 1
Recording in progress.
Collective prosperity grounded in truth, justice, and mutual respect. They made the call not in our name. And that to me was an important patriotic call. Madam Speaker, it is in this spirit that I tabled the following documents before this House. The Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, Adjustment Appropriation Bill, Taxation Laws Amendment Bill, Tax Administration Laws Amendment Bill, and this medium budget policy statement. As we table this policy statement, we have reason to be optimistic about the future of our country. Our optimism is rooted in the progress we've made in keeping the promises we have set out. A promise to grow the economy faster, to strengthen public finances, and to improve life for all South Africans. 2 years ago, we committed to stabilizing public debt in the current year and then begin to reduce it. Despite a challenging environment of persistently low economic growth, we are on track to achieving this goal. We also committed to remove South Africa from the Financial Action Task Force grey list. We have delivered on this commitment in just 2.5 years. This is thanks to collaboration across government departments, law enforcement agencies, and the private sector. Exiting grey listing enhances South Africa's attractiveness to investors and make it easier to do business with us. However, we cannot afford to be complacent. FATF's next mutual evaluation of South Africa begins in the first half of 2026. We must continue to tackle money laundering and terrorism financing to stay off the grey list. Honourable members, we also promise to use our presidency of the first African G20 to firmly place Africa on the global agenda. As we approach the final stretch of our presidency, we have successfully concluded meetings of the G20 finance ministers and central bank governors, brokering critical consensus for the continent's development. We are ready for the Leaders' Summit in Johannesburg just over a week's time. Despite all of this progress, we must remain realistic about the present and the action it demands. South Africa's most pressing challenge remains accelerated economic growth to create jobs and reduce poverty at the scale required. Drawing lessons from the 2025 budget process, we have engaged extensively to build consensus on how to achieve faster growth and leverage public finances to attract investment needed to create jobs and improve life for all. Allow me to turn to the economic outlook. Madam Speaker, South Africa's economic prospects are shaped not only by domestic factors, but by also global developments. Global growth is estimated to slow slightly to 3.2% in 2025. Amid ongoing trade tensions, geopolitical uncertainty, and supply chain disruptions, while the shocks of the unilateral tariffs imposed by the United States have not materialized severely as expected, their delayed effects, coupled with the rising protectionism, pose future risks to global productivity and price stability. Global equity markets have surged, driven by AI-related stocks and central bank rate cuts. But this rally carries the risk of sudden reversals. Given this uncertainty, it is critical that we leverage the immense opportunities presented by the Sub-Sahara region. We continue to make progress in the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement to strengthen multilateralism and regional cooperation.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day, Father. Thank you.
Order, Honorable Nanda.
Domestically, we forecast real GDP growth at 1.2% for 2025, more than double the economic growth in 2024. We now forecast real GDP growth will average 1.8% between 2026 and 2028. Madam Speaker, the structural reforms we have embarked on, particularly in the energy and logistics, will be key to lifting our rate of growth closer to levels demanded by our developmental needs. Our strategy for faster growth and healthier finances continues to be anchored on 4 pillars. The first is maintaining macroeconomic stability. The second is implementing structural reforms. The third is building state capability. And the fourth, supporting growth-enhancing infrastructure. Madam Speaker, faster economic growth requires effective macroeconomic management. Over the past year, National Treasury and the Reserve Bank have jointly assessed the impact of a lower target on our economy and the fiscal framework. This work has now been concluded and recommends a revision to the target to strengthen the framework and enhance price stability by better anchoring inflation expectations and aligning South Africa to international best practice. Today, I announce a new inflation target for South Africa of 3% with a 1% point tolerance band. This decision follows agreement between the governor of the South African Reserve Bank and my consultation with the President and Cabinet. The 1 percentage point band provides flexibility to accommodate unexpected inflationary shocks. This new target immediately replaces the previous target range between 3 and 6% and will be implemented over the next 2 years. Over time, the lower target will decrease inflation expectation and creating room for lower interest rates. This supports household spending and business investment, boosting economic growth and job creation. The short-term fiscal cost of lower target, which include nominal GDP and revenue growth, will make achieving fiscal targets more challenging. Yet, the long-term benefits of taking this step far outweigh this cost. We remain committed to ensuring that our macroeconomic policies serve the best interest of all South Africans. Madam Speaker, our fiscal strategy aims to achieve the following goals. Anchor fiscal policy by stabilizing debt and growing the primary budget surplus. Mobilize and direct more resources towards infrastructure investment and improving efficiency and effectiveness of spending. I'm pleased to inform the House and the country that we are on track to restore fiscal sustainability. Government debt will stabilize in 25-26 at 77.9% of GDP. This is the first time since 2008 financial crisis that public debt will not grow as a percentage of GDP. Since 2008, spending has consistently exceeded revenue, driving up debt and debt service costs. These costs crowded out spending on critical services and exerted pressure on lending rates across the economy. But we are now turning this around. This year, revenues will exceed the budget estimate by 19.3 billion. Meanwhile, debt service costs will be lower by 4.8 billion. Over the MTF, debt service costs will grow by 3.87% annually. This is a significant reduction from the 7.4% growth anticipated at the time of the 2025 budget. We will also achieve a primary budget surplus of 8.5 billion, or 0.9% of the GDP this year. This will grow to 224 billion by 2028. Let me just explain this thing a bit. A primary surplus is quite critical because in the absence of that primary surplus, you are not going to impact on the debt trajectory. The primary surplus help to change that debt structure in a downward spiral. What are the effects of that? Your debt service costs come down. Once your debt service costs come down, sir, revenue becomes available to fund our developmental goals. The overall budget deficits will now narrow from 4.5% of GDP in 2025-26 to 2.7% in 28-29. Madam Speaker, to further ensure long-term sustainability of public finances, the government is considering options for a form of fiscal anchor. We're exploring what we call a principle-led approach that provides for a clear parliamentary oversight, stronger reporting on fiscal risk, and transparency on distributional impacts. Earlier this year, we published a discussion paper on this topic, and consultation with stakeholders and experts are ongoing. The better than estimated tax revenue of 19.7 billion is due to stronger household expenditure, which has boosted value-added tax collection and improvements in corporate tax receipts and dividend taxes. Lower than expected VAT refunds also contributed to improved revenue outlook. As indicated in 2025 budget, an additional 4 billion was allocated to the South African Revenue Service. This allocation was intended in part to strengthen debt collection and thereby increase revenue collection by between 20 and 50 billion per year. We'll continue to monitor SARS revenue performance for the remainder of the year. This assessment will inform whether the 20 billion additional tax increases for 2026 budget, as earlier proposed, can be withdrawn. A final decision, let me just say, if it withdrawn, and the 20 billion is not achieved, there are two options open to us. Is to then raise taxes or cut expenditure. There's no two ways. That's how this thing works. We must find revenue or cut expenditure. Honorable members, South Africa faces problems of illicit trade that threatens our economy endangers consumers, and robs the fiscals of billions in revenue. The growing market for illicit cigarettes and alcohol poses serious risk to public health and undermine legitimate business. Each year, billions of rands in taxes go uncollected, funds that could have closed our revenue gap and avoided tax increases entirely. According to SARS, since 2020, government has lost around 40 billion in excise revenues to the cigarette black market. This same is true for illicit alcohol and fuel. Government is clamping down on this illegal trade. And in the last 6 months, SARS suspended 3 licenses for non-compliant tobacco production. The Financial Intelligence Center has provided intelligence reports to SARS to assist in investigation of criminal syndicates. Together, they have identified illicit markets in tobacco, precious metals, fuel, and procurement fraud. Custom officials must fulfill their duty to prevent criminals from dodging taxes and flooding our markets with dangerous products. Of course, for them to achieve that, just if I may explain, they will have to need the full might of the law enforcement agencies behind them. That coordinated work is quite important. I'm pleased to inform this House that Cabinet has already taken a decision that coordinated work must take place. Madam Speaker, the adjustment in revenue means that we can make changes to our spending estimates. For the current year, additional expenditure of 15.8 billion rand is proposed amongst the in-year adjustment, and is also 2 billion rand for the building of Parliament and 1 billion rand for the Independent Electoral Commission for the 2026 municipal election. Let me explain a bit. Earlier on, if you were listening, I said this year we've got an over collection of about 19.3 billion rand. That's what I said earlier on. We realize that we may not have sufficient resources next year. What we have done is to say, what are the recurrent expenditures for next year, which we can fund this year? What this 15.8 billion does, it takes those recurrent expenditures for the following year while bringing them forward and funding them in this specific year. In addition, the spending announced in May budget for the national dialogue as well as its carry-through costs are catered for here. These allocations are on top of the additional funding provisions for education and health announced in the May budget. Madam Speaker, President Ramaphosa has consistently spoken of infrastructure as the flywheel of our economy. In line with this vision and advancing our pillar of growth enhancing infrastructure, we are shifting the composition of spending from consumption to investment. Capital payments are the fastest growing expenditure item at 7.5% over the medium term. We are leveraging public resources to mobilize private finance and expertise at scale to strengthen service delivery, improve spending effectiveness, and drive high economic growth. The amendments to the PPP regulations took effect from the 1st of June 2025, and these unlock potential across spheres of government and streamline approvals for smaller projects. 3 weeks ago, new guidelines on unsolicited bids and fiscal commitments and contingent liabilities were issued, and these took effect immediately. The unsolicited bid guidelines provides a clear structured pathway for the private sector to submit project ideas to government. The other guideline provides a framework for reporting and managing of fiscal commitments and contingent liabilities arising out of the PPP projects. Municipality PPP regulations will be amended by 2026. Leverage, and I'm still going to give you a report, President, because you said I must do it this year. it has been difficult to finish this year because of a number of regulatory framework that accompanies that. Leveraging lessons from the renewable IPP projects to streamline planning and procurement, the Department of Transport Private Sector Participation Unit is reviving the passenger transport and logistics sector. Following strong interest from the freight logistic request for information, the unit will issue the first rail corridor request for proposal by December 2025, with others following in early 2026. The unit has also issued requests for information for investment opportunities in modernizing and growing the passenger rail system. Water Partnership Office is making progress in preparing non-revenue water and reuse projects across municipalities. I mean, this term non-revenue water is still, I can't understand it. I always, people, why do you say this is non-revenue water? It's water that is transported from, an example, from a water board to a municipalities, it gets lost on the process. And we call it non-revenue water, whereas it's wasted water. Okay. These will create robust pipeline for the private sector to co-invest, and we have reconfigured budget facility for infrastructure to run for 4 bid windows annually instead of just 1. Since the configuration, the budget facility for infrastructure has received 28 submissions. Out of those, 9 projects were accepted for detailed analysis. Funding for the tune of 4.1 billion is also allocated for disaster relief to fix schools, pipelines, clinics, and substation damage between the last year and this year flooding in KwaZulu-Natal, Mpumalanga, and Eastern Cape. To raise the funding for these BFI projects, a new infrastructure bond will be launched soon to raise a minimum of 15 billion. The bond forms part of our efforts to introduce dedicated financing instrument that can mobilize cheaper financing to support infrastructure agenda. Government will also contribute to 2 billion to capitalize the credit guarantee facility. If you don't understand clearly, please meet Dr. Ramokgopa. That's his pet project on the transmission line. Initially, the vehicle will support electricity transmission expansion, directly contribute to our efforts at energy security, while also driving decarbonization. Let me just pause again. What Dr. Ramokgopa says is that in provinces such as Northern Cape, where you have renewable projects, I'm going to use his term, we can't evacuate the electrons. So what does that mean is that we can't take the electricity out of Northern Cape because there are no transmission lines. And this is what the project is intended to do. This heralds a new era in PPPs where private investment in high voltage transmission lines is enabled. This is really progress in our movement away from merely fixing the power utility to securing power to the grid from a range of sources. This is a key and innovative part of infrastructure reforms developed with international partners to de-risk private investment without state guarantees. We're also committed to simplifying the institutional arrangements across the infrastructure ecosystem. The new Infrastructure Finance and Implementation Support Agency will be in place by March. The agency will provide project preparation support to supply the BFI pipeline. It will centralize infrastructure financing functions to systematically crowd in private capital and promote the use of alternative delivery mechanisms. Honourable members, this is how we will ensure that our goal of public sector investment in infrastructure exceeds the 1 trillion mark over the next 3 years. Madam Speaker, we estimate that tax collection will remain buoyant over the medium term. Despite the higher than expected revenue performance in 2025-26, gross revenue are projected to fall short of 2025 budget estimates. by around 15.7 billion over the next 2 years. Improving tax revenue will require more sustainable economic growth and further gains in tax compliance and administration. Over the medium term, consolidated spending will increase from 2.6 trillion this year to 2.9 trillion in 28-29. Our commitment to support low-income and vulnerable households through education, health, and social protection remains. The lion's share of the consolidated non-interest spending, approximately 61% over the next 3 years, continues to fund the basket of government-provided services and benefits that reduce the cost of living of our citizens. Madam Speaker, this spending is our commitment to the redistribution of income and opportunities in favor of the most vulnerable households in our society. To build on the work of spending reviews, we have got something called targeted responsible savings underway. Honorable members, eliminating waste and inefficiency in government is non-negotiable if we are to maintain public trust that tax money is spent responsibly. The Targeted and Responsible Savings Initiative systematically identifies duplication, eliminates waste, reorganize programs to deliver value for money. We are implementing medium-term savings of 6.7 billion by closing or scaling down low priority and underperforming programs immediately. More than half of this involves identifying people who are double dipping and defrauding in the social grant system. We're also scaling down the public transport network grant. The grant has failed to meet the objectives, and some cities have failed entirely to get the projects off the ground. An integrated public transport system is essential to support the working class communities. We will be reconsidering how to lower the cost of mobility and rework the institutional framework. Commuter rail is the backbone of our public transport system. PRASA is making some progress in revitalizing our rail system. 11.8 million passenger trips in 2022-23 to 116 million last year. This is only the start of the broader continuous process to redirect funds from inefficient programs to pressing national priorities. An update will be provided in the February budget. Madam Speaker, let me now turn to the subnational sphere. Allocation to provinces protect frontline services. For municipalities, they ensure continued provision of basic services that include water, refuse removal, sanitation, and electricity. The share of the national raised revenue for provinces and municipalities will respectively increase to 4.24% and 9.7% over the medium term. The allocation, among other things, also cater for changes in population growth and to compensate municipalities for increase in bulk services, service charges related to free basic services. In addition, they also ensure the placing of local government operating capacity on firm grounding. Madam Speaker, we are making steady progress on structural reforms that are a key pillar to our strategy of growing the economy. These structural reforms are crucial to dismantling the binding constraints that have held back our economy. They are also about ensuring that every lever of the state works efficiently and effectively towards the same goal of a stably growing, competitive, and inclusive growth. Through Operation Vulindlela, now in phase 2, since it started in 2021, we are building a tangible momentum across energy, logistics, water, and now critical in local government, spatial integration and digital transformation. Not long ago, our country was on the brink of energy crisis. Unreliable electricity supply threatened to derail our economy and the transformation of our society. I'm pleased to say that we have avoided that scenario, and instead, we have begun a march towards reliable supply of energy. Load shedding has come down significantly. Through focused and targeted interventions led by Operation Vulindlela, we are transforming the sector. We are building competitive wholesale market that gives investors certainty. The National Transmission Company has now applied for its market operator license. We are investing in new capacity and alternative sources. More than 2,220 megawatts of solar, wind, and battery projects are in development, with 720 megawatts at advanced stage. Eskom has added 800 megawatts from Kusile Unit 6 and is showing signs of operational and financial improvements. The movement of freight within the country faced serious challenges, resulting in traffic congestion as the transport of goods shifted from rail. This led to an overall decline in the volume of goods and export transited. Reforms in freight logistics are again in gaining speed. 11 private train operators now have slots on 41 routes across 6 corridors. Port efficiency is improving, with vessel waiting time down from 75%, while container handling is faster, with Durban Pier 2 welcoming private operators. We expect to unlock 200 billion in investment over the next 5 years. These much needed reforms in logistics will increase the volume of rail freight, reduce port congestion, improve the country's economic performance. Water security is a constraint. We are moving faster to provide legislative certainty, clarity that will stabilize the sector. The Water Service Amendment Bill clarifies institutional rule, which will, while the National Water Resource Infrastructure Agency launches in April 2026. We're also ensuring that investment in water infrastructure addresses the problem of maintenance and old infrastructure. To attract skills, investment, and tourism, we have modernized our visa system by clearing 300,000 backlog. These reforms demonstrate we have and are creating space for private sector investment and building infrastructure. And as Speaker, municipalities are at the forefront of providing essential services. However, many are fraught with capacity constraints that hinder their ability to deal with allocated budgets into reliable services. It is for this reason that several reforms have been introduced to urgently remedy this untenable situation. Let me just give and again highlight a particular example. Minister Hlabisa will tell you, as we are allocating the emergency relief for disaster this year, we were also allocating to municipalities that were allocated last year, who have not been able to spend last year's allocation. That's the kind of constraint we need to attend to. We are piloting utility reform program to stabilize and professionalize water and electricity businesses in a few municipalities in Mpumalanga. To address persistent underspending and capacity constraints at the local level, we are reforming the municipal infrastructure grant. Where municipalities show persistent failure, delivery will shift to an indirect model through agencies such as like MISA and DBSA, coupled with time-bound capability plans aimed at restoring direct funding. We're seeing encouraging progress in metro trading service reform. Over the 2026 budget, 19.3 billion rand has been reallocated towards this reform in line with council-approved improvement plan. Financial sustainability is improving through better billing, tight credit controls, cost-reflective tariffs with indigent protection, and co-funding crowding in concessional and commercial finance. Today, we launch a government's first procurement payment dashboard using data for the basic accounting system. The dashboard is available on the National Treasury e-tender website, showing the payments made to suppliers by most national and provincial government as captured on our payment system. This represents a massive step forward in procurement transparency. The dashboard will identify inefficiencies, anomalies, and uncovering opportunities for consolidation. It also enables analysis of procurement expenditure and the suppliers that do business with state give citizens, academic and civil society the ability to hold departments accountable, supporting efforts to fight corruption and fraud. Let me just illustrate this point. Illustrate this point. If you had this system during Tembisa Hospital, what?
Order, honorable members. Let's allow the minister to make his example. Order.
What the system does.
Order.
If you read this SIU report, what they were doing, they would avoid the tendering system by saying, putting all tenders that are below 500, you are not supposed to tender. You are supposed to ask for 3 quotes. And then people would go on and ask for 3 quotes and split tenders to be under 500. And then this, at the national level or anywhere else, would not be able to track that conduct. What this system does is going to help us to track that conduct and be able to raise flags, to raise red flags at an appropriate time. I know there are some colleagues who says they must abolish tenders. They must first change the constitution before they can do that. We are also waging war. We're also waging war.
Minister is proceeding on the next page. I think he's done with his example, so let's allow him to continue. Order, honorable minister, you can proceed. Order. Order.
We are also waging war on ghost workers in public service. We have heard calls from political parties and civil society. National Treasury is working closely with the Department of Public Service and Administration and Home Affairs on data-driven approach that integrates systems across the government. We're beginning to see the result of this collaboration. We have already uncovered close to 9,000 high-risk cases that have been flagged for further verification. The early retirement program, which provides financial incentive for employees to exit the public service from October 2025, allows for us to rejuvenate the public service. These interventions will deliver long-term average savings of around 3.5 billion per annum. More importantly, they demonstrate our commitment to fiscal discipline and ensure that every rand spent contributes effectively to growth and service delivery. Madam Speaker, the presentation of the medium-term budget policy statement sends a clear message that South Africa is choosing growth, stability, and reform. It represents our commitment to an open, transparent budget process. It is intended to empower all stakeholders to contribute to the discussion of the nation's priorities. It makes transparent the budget framework through which the government seeks to achieve the nation's social and economic development. We will use our collective efforts to increase the pace and scale of tackling unemployment and building stronger economy. Speaker, as I close, allow me to express my deepest gratitude to the President, as usual, and the Deputy President for the Council of their support and for their leadership. Thank you all to the Deputy Ministers of Finance and the excellent National Treasury team led by the Director General. They have walked this path with me, sharing freely the insight, expertise, and passion for our country. Thank you to the Commissioner of the South African Revenue Services and the Governor for the South African Reserve Bank. Thank you to my cabinet colleagues, the ministers of the Committee on the Budget and the Budget Council from the provinces, who share the heavy load of tough decisions that must be taken in the sustainability of our finances. Thank you as well to what is called the Technical Committee on the Budget, which is composed of a few DGs who have done splendid work. To the Parliamentary Committee of Finance Appropriation and Public Account, I express my sincere appreciation to all of you. And lastly, Umam Chawe and the family in general for understanding. And to the citizens of this beautiful country, for your faith in us, is our motivation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Order, honorable members. Order. Order. Honorable members. I thank the honorable minister. Order. Honorable minister. You can take your seat so that I thank you properly. I want to thank you for your presentation, Honorable Minister. I will take note of you, Minister Mackenzie. And the papers tabled by the Minister will be referred to the relevant committees. And we trust that this spirit shown today will proceed towards February for the tabling of the budget. Honorable Mackenzie.
Honorable Speaker, yeah, this is my fence.
Honorable Mackenzie, Honorable Mackenzie, what's the point of order?
The finance minister has proven that we've turned the corner. He just made one mistake.
Honorable,
he didn't thank the government in waiting forever. Waiting forever.
Order, Honorable Minister, that's not the point of order.
But he's a clown minister.
Order, I request members to stand and wait for the presiding officer and the maids to leave the chamber. That concludes the business for the day and the House is adjourned.
Parliament. Parliament, as the representative of the people, monitors and seeks to influence government policy and action through the budget. The budget is the instrument for translating policies and plans into public goods and services. Any policy or plan without a budget attached to it is unlikely to be successfully implemented. Economic success depends on the ability of government to employ limited resources with maximum effect. The role of Parliament in this regard cannot be overstated. Parliament's duty is to detect and prevent abuse, prevent illegal and unconstitutional budgetary conduct on the part of the government, make government budgetary operations more transparent, and hold the government answerable on how taxpayers' money is spent. Parliament exercises its oversight through various portfolio committees that assess the budget and other plans, as well as the performance of each department, including their financial performance, and hold them accountable. The budget process is crucial to good governance because it ensures that government expenditure remains aligned to South Africa's policy goals and objectives. What is also of great importance is that ongoing monitoring and tracking of the executive by Parliament allows for intervention in the event of wrongful expenditure and failures in service delivery. The process holds government departments accountable for their expenditure and gives Parliament and the citizens it represents an opportunity to make their own demands and interventions.
And there you have it. That was Minister Godongwana, of course, addressing the National Assembly with regards to the medium-term budget statement. And of course, as you know, it has been a rocky atmosphere for us here since the GNU has taken place and since the national elections last year. We've had 3 budgets, well, attempted budgets, and of course, the final one was in May. And that is why today, on the 12th of November 2025, we have witnessed Minister Godongwana giving that address on the MTBPS. Now, we're still in studio with Mr. Holeni, our resident economist, who's going to give us some analysis on what the minister had to say. Did he solve the problems? Can we be excited about next year's budget? We are yet to find out. Mr. Holeni, of course, we sat, we listened, we watched. What are your reactions from what the minister had to say?
Look, I think one of the things that we must always give to Minister Godongwana is that he gets on to the point. Yes, he does explain, in terms of some of the cases, but very businesslike. And yes. I think, what he has covered in terms of the aspects of the MTBPS, which I think, it's still debatable because I feel it's a report back. But be that as it may, detailed, gave, feedback with regards to aspects, which are crucial, where government, is going to spend money, where they've unlocked, blockages, if you look at the transport and logistics, energy, sector, because, energy is was one of the major constrainers of, economic growth. But, having solved the problem, we expect that, the economy should be growing at a much faster pace. He spoke about, the capacity of the state, which I think is very important. And in fact, I almost feel like, it's something that, the minister should have begun with, because the capacity of the state, with all the trillions which are being pronounced, SARS is doing a great job, as we can see, and the reforms that, they are working on. So the allocation that they've been given, I think, of about 7.5 billion, is yielding, fruits. Yes, okay, an overrun of about, 20 billion with regards, to the collections. But, we expect that, in the outer years, or within the MTREF, they'll be able to deliver more. So in our estimates, we had estimated that, at least they should be giving us an overshoot of about 60 billion. If it's about 20 billion, you can see that, it's a third of what, the models were showing. The other thing is that over the MTREF, we're expecting that, SARS should be delivering about 200, or 220 billion in terms of, additional revenue that they are going to put forward. So I think, the summation of, what the minister has spoken about, quite detailed, from the triple Ps in terms of delivering projects. We can at least see a clear path from intention to implementation of what government is trying to do. Of course, the blockages that are within are the ones that need to be dealt with so that the procurement systems may kick into place, the resources that are required may kick into place, and so on. So, but overall, I think, business-like, a great report back. I still contend, with what the minister has said, because the policies, I think, is what we expect to see more out of, this midterm budget speech, that, moves, the needle in many ways.
Now, talking about those policies, then what were your expectations? Because you say that it was more of a report back of this is what we said we would do and this is what we have done. So what are some of those policy expectations that you had?
Look, I think the one that, was promised, and I think it's long overdue, in my view, the triple P revision, which is, to undertake, unsolicited projects, at a national level. We are yet, to find, the clarity and the finality of the triple P framework at the local government level. Because, as much as, the minister, has emphasized that, local government is where things happen, this is where at least, we're expecting that those triple P frameworks, would have been put in place, because there are actual projects that are waiting, whether it's energy projects, whether it's waste, projects. And as we go around the country conducting our work, as DSO consulting, we see a lot of wastewater treatment plants, which have become defunct. And when you have a wastewater treatment plant, which has become defunct, you start, imagining what, kind of, quality of water the people are getting. But also on the other side, we see it as a loss, in revenue for that particular municipality because they are not able to supply the clean water that they should be supplying. So their coffers, get affected when they now put together their own budget. So there are many lost opportunities. There are also service delivery issues that, we are seeing. So I think, the Triple P is one that, definitely we wanted to see. For us, I think, take it forward. We spoke about reindustrialization of the country, earlier.
Yes.
That I think for us is a bold, step, which of course the SEZs are there, the IDZs, are there and so on. But, there needs to be a bolder, and move, towards, even setting up, such as, the various offices that are being set up, to run the various projects that are there. Set up, something that, drives. And yes, it may be there. You can argue there's a unit at the DTIC, but you want to see that, being driven much more actively, whether it's at the inland, SEZs, which are supposed to be the automotive centers in the likes of in Gauteng and Tshwane, and the various, SEZs, the Fita homos that, are, starting to show a bit of fruits, the Makado ones, that, are a bit, behind, with regards to their deliveries, and the many other SEZs that are there. So I think, if SEZs, are being punted as the way of driving or reindustrializing the country, we want to see a lot more action. We want to see a lot more, at least, support, removal of red tapes. Some of the things that, we want to at least, have seen, is where government becomes an obstacle to itself. At times, you find that, a huge project which is supposed to deliver a huge service delivery imperatives, jobs, unlock, the economy, gets stuck because of an EIA, environmental impact study. And who is the custodian of that? Government is. And we're not saying take shortcuts, but all we are saying is that, let's have a streamlined process that, by the time you get, to turning the sword, you are at least, have all of the ducks in a row, and you don't have unnecessary delays that may delay those projects, because budgets have to be returned if, they are not, spent, within that fiscal, allocation. So those are some of the bigger things that we were expecting, to see. Small businesses, I think, we have a passion for. Small businesses for us, perhaps, I was, optimistic to say, take the SRD, grant, move it, to a small business. Go and recapitalize your NEFs, go and recapitalize, your SETFAs, recapitalize those DFIs that government is putting forward to support, small and medium enterprises that are wanting to get on. But the other thing as well, we must talk about, the startup fund in this country. The country does not, we don't embrace, startups. And startups is where someone sits in their own garage and they've come up, with an invention which perhaps, needs, small monies, for testing, for piloting, and to refine it so that, it can then go on and see the light of day, where even commercial enterprises can be able to finance it. But it needs, some kind of, support of funds. So those are the areas which for us, the bias, you can hear for me is how do we grow the economy? As opposed, to yes, we can remove, the red tapes, but removing red tape must equal to growing the economy.
And of course, earlier this year, when the minister delivered the budget speech, he talked about trade-offs. Do you think we're still making those trade-offs, and which parts of our economy are suffering as a result of those trade-offs?
Well, let me start by saying that I think we've seen a lot of conservatism coming through in the way that, the fiscal policy, the economic policy. Look, monetary policy in its nature must always be, on the conservative side, because you're now dealing with, the real monies of people. But, from an economic, growth point of view, NDP, and I'm not sure if, anyone, opens it, to see where we are. And we're 2025 now, 2030 is coming, where are the targets? And we've seen that, some of the targets, or most of the targets, we are off, with regards, to achieving all of those particular targets. So the issue here is that how do you then drive programs that are well intended without the conservatism that, we are seeing, so that you let the economy flourish. At times, let it overheat a little bit, but, with the positive activity. We'll take the likes of China to see what, the likes of China have had to do to re-gear themselves, close themselves up. Of course, you'll argue that, their economy in numbers is greater than where we are. But remember, our numbers as well must not just be South Africa. It must be Africa as a continent. With the Africa Free Continental Trade Agreement, that is in place, our numbers must always be counted, with the African continent to supply all of the various things that, African countries, still import, from European countries. And you'll be shocked at some of the items that, we have an opportunity and the capability to supply, from simple things of, bakeries and baking bread, simple things of, toothpicks, simple things of, so very, basic, bread and butter items, which we can be a provider to the continent. So I think that's where perhaps, as a country, when I say we're conservative, we're not thinking outside. of our borders. We always are thinking about the problems that we have, and at times even missing the solutions that we should be implementing to solve those particular problems.
And I mean, you speak of something, it's quite close to home, that we're not even thinking about trading the simplest of things with your African countries. In your view, what is the problem apart from not thinking broader? Do you think it's a red tape issue? What is the issue with South Africa making sure that we trade with African countries and not necessarily just looking at other countries? You have your European countries, Asia, and all the likes.
Look, I think perhaps, I can hazard a guess because, of, the isolation that, we've suffered. South Africans, generally, we don't travel very well.
Sure.
We don't integrate, very well in terms of, the rest of the continent. We don't know the continent. We don't know the vast, size of the continent. We don't know the youth dividend, the human resources, in terms of, the skills that are resident in some of, the countries, the high levels of education that are sitting, for instance, you can talk of, us, being in the Anglophone, sort of, sections, you have the Mozambiques and the Angolas that, are the Lusophones. They often, there's always, some kind of, barriers with regards to, communication or language, issues. You look at the Francophone as well with regards to the French, side, and so on and so forth. So I think we're a continent of different persuasions because of, the historical colonial past. And we ought to make a much more effort, to be able to trade amongst each other. But the big thing is the Africa Continental Trade, free trade, agreement offers us that opportunity because we want to then speak the same language from a trade point of view. So trade policies ought to be aligned. Economic policies, ought, to at least, chase, very similar goals where one country is chasing renewables, for instance, with regards, to install. Others must be looking at, how they supply the minerals that, goes into that. And others must be manufacturing the components that go into those, programs. So I think the whole thing of cooperation is still a huge factor from us, as African continent, and including us, as a country. We have a huge opportunity. We need to take advantage of that opportunity.
Now, earlier you spoke about how your consultancy business has consulted many a times with municipalities, local municipalities. The last time here on Parliament TV, we had Local Government Week, and we were looking at some of the issues there. And of course, since the State of the Nation address, President Cyril Ramaphosa has emphasized the importance of ensuring that local governments are emphasized and that there's proper resources that are put into them to ensure that their service delivery. From your perspective, what is the issue and the problem with local governments? Why isn't there proper service delivery, and why isn't there proper financial management within them?
Look, I think we must start with, one of the policy proposals, which I think the minister could have broken ranks, but maybe I'm being optimistic. We still allocate about 9.7% to local government. So the assumption is that, the 90% the local municipalities must go and find, that money. The districts will get, obviously their equitable share or the grants that support them. The cities perhaps are much more well off because they have the industry behind, them. But the poor municipalities, in the far-flung areas of our country, don't have the industry to go and find, the 90%. And very simply, it says, government is saying there's 10 cents, go and do with it, whatever you want to do, local government, but the 90 cents you're going to have to find yourselves. So I think, when you talk of service delivery in some of these places, there are dire, a shortage of resources.
Yes.
Alongside that, to attract the relevant skills and the requisite skills, the attorneys, the engineers, the finance people, becomes very difficult because, the kind of pay scales are not going to meet, the requirements of maybe someone who has worked, in a city before to move to a local municipality somewhere in the outskirts. So then you miss, the skills, attraction drive, because you don't get the right people. Then you get people acting in roles. You get vacancies. You get, councillors, sometimes, who are coming in new with, the elections, and they have to learn the space of local government. You find the experienced ones, have moved on to province and moved on to other, areas which perhaps they could be still contributing to the lot of local government. So those are the, if you want, the knock-on effects. And so in totality, capability in local government is then weakened. And capability is leadership, is strategy, it's service delivery. So that is what it is. So if you weaken the leadership in terms of those that had built good experience, and you leave them to move wherever, whether it's political or if it's the technocrats, you have a problem. Where you don't follow a strategy. Yes, you'll argue you have an IDP. Some of the IDPs are still cut and paste. Okay, they are not tailor-made for some of those municipalities. And then service delivery, because service delivery is, you need different models for different areas. You need different resources for different areas. And then you'll find, other challenges, where perhaps, you try and augment your capacity with using consultants, and then you get, slapped on the wrist because you don't have the capacity. What do you do? So you have, those, various, situations. So I think the model for local government, if we just address, the allocation of resources in financial, terms to municipalities, where perhaps, the minister should wake up and say, right, now I'm allocating you 30 cents. Let's see how far you can go. Go and fill the vacancies. Go and find the skills. Go and find, the right people. Let those that, have the skills, remain longer within local government to see through some of the long-term plans. Because even in local government, if you talk of an NDP, you must still have, an IDP that, is 5 years. But you want, something that, also is beyond, the five years, so that you have a 30-year plan.
Something sustainable.
Something sustainable, and so on. Of course, you can talk about, the district development, model. That is, holds promise. Let's implement it, but let it not just be governed by, the annual or the 3-year, which is the MTREF, or the 5-year IDPs. Let it be a longer-term plan, which must always, exceed, the terms of, various officials and governments and administrations and so on, so that it becomes something that, drives the municipality and not just, a pet plan of the municipal manager or the new administration that comes in, but it becomes a plan that drives a sustainable development for that particular region.
Of course, then, Mr. Oleni, at least so far this past year, we've had some good news, right? Eskom did say that for the first time they have a profit, right? And then also, when we talk about SARS, they did say that the revenue collection is a whole lot better now, right? Now, from your perspective, professionally, what is it that the minister can do differently to ensure that the change is felt on the ground, especially with addressing unemployment, ensuring that the economy grows, now that some of the biggest issues have been solved, like, for example, Eskom, which was it was a lot. And then now SARS that says now, look, we are collecting revenue now.
So I think, those two models, become great examples for at least, how to run an institution clean governance, but also, ESCOM has to be entrepreneurial to be able to turn out, those amounts. And in fact, SARS has to run entrepreneurially as well, because if they were just sitting and saying we are just another tax collection office, and they are waiting for people to come and pay, but SARS is deploying various technologies, and AI and whatever, and data analysis and all of those things. So I think it's a testimony that, even the other areas, we're looking now for the logistics side, to also come to the party with improvements, your Transnets, your process. And we're hearing, I think, some good news, but, some of the infrastructure, for instance, for PRASA had really been ravaged and destroyed and stolen, basically. So to rebuild, all of those things. So there's a rebuilding process, which each one of the institutions, from what, at least we can see of ESCOM, as well as what SARS is doing, there needs to be a rebuilding exercise, which is deliberate, to go and gear up, to resource, to create capacity, and to make sure that there's capability in terms of, the leadership, the strategy, and a service delivery model that's going to drive the development of those institutions. So I think this is what each and every institution currently in our country should be going back and looking at, even if there's no impact or effect of any other thing, but to say, how do we remodel ourselves, how do we redefine ourselves in the new realities of what is hitting us from a macroeconomics point of view, from the global issues, the tariff, whatever wars that are taking place. How do we remodel ourselves, because it can't be business as usual for just waking up and saying, I'm going to report to the office, now I'm going home, and so on. So we need to look at how we revitalize our institutions and drive at least and take risks. I think the point here is there are aspects where perhaps we pull back. Let's take the risks that are going to take us forward. And I think one of the things I would not be remiss, to mention, at least the grey listing haven't come off. It means, at least, the financing and seeking of financing of institutions would mean that, that perhaps, then there could be better inflow of much more affordable, much more favorable financing. So those institutions can take advantage of being able to raise, money from the open market, which at least it would be on favorable terms. Then they can revitalize themselves and gear themselves up for better growth.
And of course, while we were watching the minister addressing the National Assembly, he mentioned Tembisa Hospital, and there was an uproar, of course. And of course, this was in relation to him saying that today they had launched government's first procurement payments dashboard, using data from basic accounting system. And he then says that this represents a massive step forward in procurement transparency. In your opinion, what have been the issues there, apart from, we know there's a lot of corruption, In your view, why isn't it that Treasury hadn't all this time adopted systems such as this to ensure that there is proper systems and metrics when it comes to ensuring that procurement is secure and airtight?
So I think, National Treasury always has, a huge role to play. And not in their defense, in any way, but to be able to touch all the aspects, which have to do with money or finances within the country. It's not always, easy. And I'll give you simple examples. We talk about, the collection of taxes. We talk about procurement. They've come up with transversal tenders. They've tried to make, services much more affordable, or to balance, the prices. Whereas, in the past, when institutions were procuring on their own, they would end up, with exorbitant, prices. So they've also tried to come back and normalize, some of those areas. But I think the question we must ask is, where are all of these problems happening? In which provinces? Where are the provinces or the provincial governments when all of these things are happening? Where are the oversight, bodies within the provincial governments? If it's municipalities, where are all of these things, happening? So yes, Treasury may be lighting, setting a trail and for everyone to follow. But I think, the issue here is about every institution being able to function, even if it's to the minimum where they are following the legislation. But of course, if you mention Tembisa, it's a hot topic now. But I think, it also shows how institutions are being looted, how institutions are being ravaged, how governance is being weakened and almost eliminated. So I think that is an aspect, which perhaps, there's a mixed, sense of saying that is how not to. As an example of where the country is, but the basic accounting system, or the dashboards that are coming up, very positive stuff. But let it at least cascade, and I think that's the message. Let it cascade provincially, locally, into all the other institutions.
And of course, then, having spoken about municipalities as well, the minister mentioned that to address persistent underspending and capacity constraints at the local level, they are reforming the municipal infrastructure grant. In your opinion, how is that going to help ensure that municipalities stop with the underspending, that money is spent where it's supposed to be spent, and that service delivery reaches the people?
With local government, what we've persistently seen is that if you don't form centers of excellence, and I think now I'm reflecting on the work we do as DSO Consulting, with very specific examples. If you don't have a strong project management unit, which you elevate, above, any other in terms of, the delivery of infrastructure. And that is where you are focusing on unlocking, making sure that the planning is done, properly, making sure that the budgets are allocated, and driving the procurement all the way to the committees and the management of those projects so that they are delivered on time. You then create a value chain. So those centers of excellence, we're talking about taking value chains, and where the value chain starts, and where it ends, you literally follow it, consistently, and you are, driving the results, and you are pushing. And if you have to seek, capacity externally, please seek capacity externally, because at the end of the day, it's about you delivering what will then deliver water, or what will deliver a road, or what will deliver a house, or and so on within there. So also in terms of the centers of excellence is what we believe that we must be supporting. We must be forming within the institutions. If it's a problem, for instance, of revenue, which we deal with quite a lot, we've seen the likes of City of Tshwane, lighting a blaze, their numbers are different now. They have improved, quite significantly. And what's the answer? There's now a revenue center of excellence, or revenue PMO within there. So we need to isolate those areas and be able to package the value chain and drive each one of the processes to the point where you have reached, and you have touched all the aspects, and you have closed all the loops, and there's governance within it, and there's accountability, and then there's results that are being delivered, at the end of that intervention.
Of course, Mr. Eleni, the MTBPS is what basically paves the way for the February budget, right? From what you've heard so far, you did say that today it sounded more like a report back, right, on the budget that was tabled in May. Now going forward, now that the MTBPS has been tabled, now that we have this report back on how Treasury has been doing in terms of expenditure, in terms of ensuring that debt is being paid off, but also ensuring that the services to the people is being done, right?
Yes.
What can people then expect, in your professional opinion? What can we expect for the February budget?
Well, I think, the bases have been set. Triple Ps, are at least, being driven. I think the other aspect we must mention, water.
Yes.
Okay. And I think the minister also went to town as well, like he also does. Non-revenue water. I don't understand why, you call it non-revenue water. Dealing with, those aspects, of at least supporting water, because water is the next, area which, if we fail at supplying water to communities, it won't be like electricity where you can go and cut firewood, or you have other alternatives. Water is exactly, what it is. It must be, piped. It must, get, to the communities, clean. So you can see that there's huge efforts, to also then follow through in terms of, what we would call the network services, because electricity is a network, water is a network, transport is a network, and so on. Roads are networks, and so on. So the idea here is to approach, I think, what we see, the network services, so that, there's support, for it, and there's budget, being put, forward. What we obviously are missing now is just, the numbers that, will then be attached to those particular network industries. From 11.8 million in terms of, PRASA trips to 116 million, maybe to double, then what is the number that's going to then take, PRASA, to the next level in terms of, which the minister also said, to make, a mobility affordable. So those are the aspects that, we want to see the various monies. And I still insist, that, if you want growth, growth has also, you have to buy growth. How do you buy growth? You set aside, money for the services that are going to catalyze, the growth, are going to result in direct growth and direct jobs and so on.
Thank you so much for joining us on Parliament TV. We've had some time.
Thank you so much.
And that is Mr. Mieleni Holeni, of course, and he was our resident analyst throughout the day today, giving you some analysis on the MTBPS, what it is that you could have expected, what it is that the minister could have touched on, and what it is that you can expect for the budget that is scheduled for next year, February. Of course, you can also keep on following the conversation and let us know what you expected and whether the minister did reach out and speak to your expectations with regards to the finance. Of course, we are right here on Parliament TV from myself, Tepo Mori, and my co-host, Teminkosi Ngoma, and the rest of the crew. Cheers.
This book, our Constitution, protects our society and empowers us to govern. The Protea leaves are us, the people, who freely elect our voices in Parliament. The drum calls the people of Parliament, through whom we govern together. And the sun is our country, healing our past, improving our lives, and energizing our potential. Together, our Constitution, our people, our Parliament, and our country are building our great South African nation. Parliament TV, Channel 408 on DSTV.
In terms of the Constitution, government is accountable to Parliament. Parliament, as the representative of the people, monitors and seeks to influence government policy and action through the budget. The budget is the instrument for translating policies and plans into public goods and services. Any policy or plan without a budget attached to it is unlikely to be successfully implemented. Economic success depends on the ability of government to employ limited resources with maximum effect. The role of Parliament in this regard cannot be overstated. Parliament's duty is to detect and prevent abuse, prevent illegal and unconstitutional budgetary conduct on the part of the government, make government budgetary operations more transparent, and hold the government answerable on how taxpayers' money is spent. Parliament exercises its oversight through various portfolio committees that assess the budget and other plans, as well as the performance of each department, including their financial performance, and hold them accountable. The budget process is crucial to good governance because it ensures that government expenditure remains aligned to South Africa's policy goals and objectives. What is also of great importance is that ongoing monitoring and tracking of the executive by Parliament allows for intervention in the event of wrongful expenditure and failures in service delivery. The process holds government departments accountable for their expenditure and gives Parliament and the citizens it represents an opportunity to make their own demands and interventions.